The morning sun painted golden streaks across the glass walls of CrossTech Industries. As Violet Chen hurried through the revolving doors, her coffee still steaming in the crisp October air. At 26, she had worked her way up from a small town receptionist to executive assistant of one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. Her journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge had shaped her into the confident woman she was today. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," Violet said softly as she entered the executive suite. Setting a perfectly prepared espresso on Damien's mahogany desk. She had memorized his preferences long ago: no sugar, extra shot, served at exactly 140 degrees. Damien Cross looked up from his computer screen, his steel-gray eyes meeting hers for a moment longer than necessary. At 29, he had built CrossTech from a college dorm room idea into a billion-dollar empire. Yet despite all his success, there was something about his assistant that made him feel more grounded than any business achievement ever had. "Thank you, Violet." Did the Tokyo investors confirm their arrival time? His voice carried the authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms, but when he spoke to her, there was always an underlying gentleness. "Flight lands at 2 p.m. I've arranged for the car service and booked the private dining room at La Bernardine for 7. She replied efficiently, pulling up his schedule on her tablet. "Also, your mother called. She wants to discuss the Sterling Industries merger over lunch." Damien's jaw tightened slightly. Helena Cross had been pushing for a strategic alliance with the Sterling family for months, and everyone knew that meant more than just business. Victoria Sterling, the golden-haired heiress with perfect connections and an even more perfect pedigree, was exactly the type of woman his mother believed belonged at his side. "Schedule it for Thursday," he said, returning to his screen. "And Violet, could you stay late tonight? We need to review the quarterly projections before tomorrow's board meeting." "Of course, Mr. Cross." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped. "Her Damien," he said quietly. "When it's just us, call me Damien." The request sent a small flutter through her chest, but she simply nodded and returned to her desk outside his office. Through the glass walls, she could see him working, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead as he concentrated. She had long ago accepted that her feelings for her boss were completely inappropriate and entirely hopeless. What Violet didn't know was that Damien had been watching her just as intently. He admired how she handled difficult clients with grace, how she remembered every employee's birthday, and how she had single-handedly organized the company's most successful charity drive. She possessed a warmth and authenticity that seemed to be missing from his world of board meetings and social obligations. The day passed in its usual rhythm of meetings, calls, and strategic decisions. By 7 p.m., the office had emptied except for Damien and Violet, who sat across from each other in his office reviewing financial reports. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, creating an intimate atmosphere neither acknowledged. "These numbers are incredible," Violet said, pointing to the growth projections. "The new AI division is exceeding all expectations." "That's thanks to your organizational skills," Damien replied, leaning back in his chair. "You coordinated the entire product launch flawlessly." Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, the professional barrier between them seemed to dissolve. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken possibilities, until Violet's phone buzzed. "I should probably head home," she said, gathering her papers. "Early morning tomorrow." "Violet, I know this might be inappropriate, but would you like to grab dinner? Nothing fancy, just two people who've been working too hard." She turned, her heart racing. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, but the hopeful expression on his face made her defenses crumble. "I'd like that," she said softly. They ended up at a small Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village, far from the usual haunts where Damien might be recognized. Over plates of handmade pasta and glasses of Chianti, they talked about everything except work. Violet shared stories of growing up in a small Pennsylvania town, while Damien revealed his struggles with the pressure of living up to his father's legacy. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be normal," he admitted, twirling his fork through the linguine. "To not have every decision scrutinized by shareholders and society pages." "Normal is overrated," Violet replied with a smile. "Trust me, I've been there." What you've built is extraordinary, Damien. You've created jobs for thousands of people and revolutionized how we interact with technology. You really believe that? I've seen you work. I've watched you make decisions that prioritize employee welfare over profit margins. It's not normal for someone in your position, and it's not something you should want to change. Their conversation was interrupted when a flash went off nearby. A photographer had recognized Damien and was snapping pictures from across the restaurant. Within minutes, Violet could see other diners pulling out their phones. "We should go," Damien said, signaling for the check, but it was too late. By the time they reached Violet's apartment building, gossip sites were already running headlines. Tech billionaire's secret romance, and CrossTech CEO spotted with mystery woman. "I'm sorry," Damien said as they stood on the sidewalk. "I didn't think about the photographers." "It's not your fault," Violet replied, though she could already imagine the complications this would create. "Thank you for dinner. It was wonderful." As she disappeared into her building, Damien knew that everything was about to change. The next morning confirmed his fears when his assistant's desk was surrounded by a small crowd of curious employees, all whispering about the photos that had appeared online overnight. Helena Cross arrived at the office before noon, her Chanel suit and steely expression announcing her displeasure before she spoke a word. "Damien, we need to talk now." In his office, she paced like a caged predator while he remained seated behind his desk. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea what these pictures could do to the Sterling merger? Victoria is devastated. Mother, I'm not engaged to Victoria Sterling. I'm not even dating her. You should be. She's perfect for you. Educated, connected, from the right family. This assistant of yours is a pretty distraction, nothing more. The name is Violet, and she's far more than a distraction." Damien's voice carried a warning tone. "She's intelligent, hardworking, and genuinely kind. Qualities that seem to be in short supply in our social circle." Helena's eyes narrowed. "Kindness doesn't run a business empire, Damien. Strategic alliances do. Political connections do. The Sterling family has both." "I don't care about the Sterling family." "Then you're more naive than I thought." Helena moved to the window, looking out at the city below. "This company wasn't built on romantic notions. Your father understood that business and personal relationships are inseparable at our level." Outside the office, Violet could hear raised voices but couldn't make out the words. When Helena finally emerged, her cold gaze swept over Violet with obvious disdain. "I trust you understand your position here, Miss Chen," she said icily before clicking away on her expensive heels. The rest of the day was tense. Damien seemed distracted during meetings, and Violet noticed several board members giving her curious looks. By afternoon, rumors were spreading through the office about the photos and their implications. Victoria Sterling arrived unannounced at 5 p.m., sweeping into the office like she owned it. Blonde, beautiful, and impeccably dressed. She embodied everything that high society expected in a billionaire's companion. "Damien, darling," she said, kissing both his cheeks in the European style. "We need to discuss this little misunderstanding." Violet watched through the glass walls as Victoria made herself comfortable in Damien's office, crossing her long legs and smiling with practiced charm. Whatever she was saying made Damien frown, but he listened politely. When Victoria finally left an hour later, she paused at Violet's desk. "You must be the famous assistant," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you understand that certain expectations come with Damien's position. Expectations that require a particular type of companion." "I understand my job perfectly, Miss Sterling," Violet replied evenly. "I'm sure you do. Just remember that jobs can change quickly in this business." As Victoria click-clacked away, Violet felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. She was beginning to realize that her dinner with Damien had set forces in motion that she might not be able to control. That evening, she packed up her desk. Damien emerged from his office. "Violet, about today. About everything that's been said. ... "You don't need to explain anything to me, Mr. Cross," she said formally, reverting to his title. "I understand the situation. You? Because I'm not sure I do anymore." He moved closer to her desk. "All I know is that last night was the first time in years that I felt like myself."
Ow.
The first time I wasn't playing a role or meeting expectations. Sometimes the right thing and the easy thing aren't the same, Violet said softly, not meeting his eyes. And sometimes the right thing is worth fighting for. As Violet gathered her things and headed for the elevator, she didn't see Damien pulling out his phone. She didn't know that he was about to make a decision that would change both their lives. Forever. She didn't realize that the billionaire who commanded boardrooms and made headlines was about to do something that would shock the business world and society pages alike. The elevator doors closed behind her. Damien Cross began planning the most important campaign of his life, one that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with love. The next morning, Violet arrived at CrossTech to find the office buzzing with an energy she had never experienced before. Employees were clustered around computer screens, their voices excited and confused. As she made her way to her desk, fragments of conversation reached her ears. Did you see his Instagram post? 20 million views already? The hashtag is trending worldwide. Violet's heart began to race as she logged into her computer. The first thing she saw was a notification that Damien Cross had tagged her in a social media post. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the link. What she found made her gasp audibly. Damien had posted a photo from their dinner the night before, but not one of the paparazzi shots. This was a candid moment she hadn't even noticed being captured, her laughing at something he had said, her eyes bright with genuine joy. While he looked at her with an expression of pure adoration, the caption read, 3 years ago, this remarkable woman walked into my office as my assistant. Today I want the world to know that she has become so much more. Violet Chen represents everything authentic and beautiful in a world that often values neither. She has challenged me to be better, to think deeper, and to remember that success, without heart, is just an empty number on a balance sheet. To those who question whether she belongs in my world, I say my world is only worth inhabiting because she's in it. The real question isn't whether she's good enough for my status, it's whether I'm worthy of her extraordinary heart. The post had exploded across social media. Comments were pouring in by the thousands. Shares were climbing into the millions. And major news outlets were already picking up the story. Hashtags like #LoveOverStatus and #Violet and Damien were trending globally. Violet stared at the screen in shock. This wasn't just a social media post. It was a declaration of war against everyone who had tried to keep them apart. Quite the morning. Surprise, came a voice behind her. She turned to find Damien standing there, looking remarkably calm for someone who had just set the internet on fire. Damien, what have you done? She whispered. Something I should have done a long time ago. Before Violet could respond, his phone began ringing, then hers. Then every phone in the office seemed to join. The chorus. News organizations, talk shows, and gossip outlets were all calling for statements, interviews, and exclusive stories. Mr. Cross, his secretary called from across the office. Your mother is on line 1, she sounds, ... The young woman paused, searching for the right word, displeased. I'll bet she does, Damien said with a slight smile. That's right, transfer all calls to our PR department and reschedule my morning meetings. I have something more important to do. He turned to Violet, extending his hand. Will you come with me? Despite every logical instinct screaming at her to decline, Violet found herself taking his hand. He led her to the elevator, then up to the roof of the CrossTech building, where a helicopter was waiting. Where are we going? She asked as they climbed aboard. Somewhere we can talk without the whole world watching, he replied, handing her a headset. 20 minutes later, they landed at a private airfield where a small jet was waiting. Violet's head was spinning from the rapid succession of events, but she trusted Damien enough to follow him onto the plane. Damien, this is crazy, she said as they settled into the luxury cabin. Can't just disappear after posting something like that. Your company, your responsibilities. ... My company will survive a few days without me, he said, buckling his seatbelt. My sanity might not survive another day of pretending I don't love you. The words hung in the air between them as the plane taxied down the runway. Love he had. Said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it took a moment for the full impact to hit her. You don't know what you're saying, she said quietly. You don't know what this will cost you. I know exactly what it will cost me, he replied, reaching for her hand. The question is what it will cost me if I don't say it. 3 hours later, they were walking along a secluded beach in Martha's Vineyard, the autumn wind whipping through their hair. Damien had shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than Violet had ever seen him. He said, as they walked along the shoreline. "There's not much to tell," Violet replied. "My parents own a small bakery in Millfield, Pennsylvania. Population 3,000 on a good day. They work 16-hour days to pay for my college education." "That's everything to tell," Damien said softly. "They sacrificed for your dreams. That's beautiful. Your mother doesn't think so. Neither does Victoria Sterling or anyone else in your social circle." Damien stopped walking and turned to face her. "Violet, look at me. Really look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, surprised by the intensity she found there. "I don't care about my social circle. I don't care about strategic marriages or business alliances. For the first time in my life, I care about something real." He cupped her face gently in his hands. "I care about you, but your company, your reputation, will adapt or won't. But I won't spend another day pretending that board meetings and profit margins matter more than this." He kissed her then, soft and tentative at first, then with growing passion as she melted into his arms. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The whole world is watching us now," Violet whispered. "Let them watch," Damien replied. "Let them see what real love looks like." Meanwhile, back in New York, Helena Cross was pacing her Fifth Avenue penthouse like a caged tiger. The social media post had been bad enough, but Damien's disappearance was a crisis of epic proportions. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from concerned board members, society friends, and business partners. Victoria Sterling sat on the white leather sofa, her composure cracking for the first time since Violet had known her. "He's lost his mind," Victoria said, her voice higher than usual. "This little nobody has bewitched him somehow." "It's a phase," Helena replied firmly, though her confidence was wavering. "Men go through these rebellious periods. He'll come too. His senses." But as the hours passed and Damien remained unreachable, both women began to realize they were dealing with something more serious than a rebellious phase. The social media storm continued to grow. #VioletandDamien was now the top trending topic in 12 countries. Memes were being created, fan art was being drawn, thousands of people were sharing their own stories of love triumphing over social expectations. What surprised everyone, including Violet and Damien, was how positive most of the response was. While some critics dismissed it as a publicity stunt, the overwhelming majority of comments were supportive. People were calling it romantic, brave, and inspiring. "Real love doesn't ask for permission," read one popular comment. "This is what happens when someone chooses heart over status," read another. "She's beautiful, inside and out. He's lucky to have her," wrote a verified celebrity account. Back on Martha's Vineyard, Violet and Damien spent the evening at a small seaside restaurant, sharing lobster rolls and talking about their dreams. For the first time, Violet allowed herself to imagine a future with him, not as his employee, but as his partner in every sense of the word. "What would you do if money wasn't an object?" Damien asked, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Travel," Violet said without hesitation. "See the places I've only read about in books. Maybe start a foundation to help kids from small towns get quality education opportunities." "What's stopping you?" "Reality?" She laughed. "Student loans. Family obligations. The fact that I'm not a billionaire." "But what if you were? What if we were partners in everything? Business, philanthropy, life?" Violet studied his face in the fading light. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet," he said with a smile. "I'm asking if you'd say yes when I do." That night, they stayed in separate rooms at a small bed and breakfast, both knowing that crossing that line would change everything irrevocably. But as Violet lay in bed watching the moonlight dance on the ocean waves, she felt a peace she had never experienced before. The next morning brought news that would change the trajectory of their relationship forever. "You need to see this," Damien said, bursting into the breakfast room with his laptop. On the screen was a news article from a major financial publication. CrossTech stock soars following CEO's love declaration. The article detailed how investors were responding positively to Damien's authenticity. viewing it as a sign of strong leadership and emotional intelligence. But that's not the best part, Damien continued, scrolling down. Look at this. The second article was from a leading business magazine, The Violet Effect, how one woman's story is inspiring a movement. It featured interviews with employees from CrossTech, all praising Violet's work ethic, kindness, and positive impact on company culture. They love you, Damien said, his voice filled with amazement. It's not because you're with me, but because of who you are. But even as they celebrated this unexpected turn of events, both knew they would have to return to New York eventually. When they did, they would face the consequences of Damien's bold declaration. The battle for their love was just beginning. The weapons would be wielded not just in boardrooms and society pages, but across every social media platform in the world. As their plane prepared for takeoff back to New York, Violet squeezed Damien's hand. "Ready for round two?" she asked. "With you by my side?" Damien replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "I'm ready for anything." Neither of them could have predicted just how much that resolve would be tested in the days to come. The CrossTech building was surrounded by news vans and photographers when Damien and Violet returned to New York. Their car had to push through a sea of reporters shouting questions and cameras flashing. Inside the lobby, security had been tripled, but even that couldn't contain the energy crackling through the building. "Mr. Cross, is it true you're planning to propose, Violet? How does it feel to be called the most influential woman on social media? Are you really going to choose love over business?" Damien kept his arm protectively around Violet as they made their way to the elevator, but she could feel the weight of every stare, every judgment, every expectation pressing down on her shoulders. When the elevator doors finally closed, providing them with a moment of quiet, Violet leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. "This is insane," she whispered. "It's about to get more insane," Damien replied, checking his phone. "The board called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. My mother has been trying to reach me every 5 minutes."
"Oh, maybe you should talk."
To her, this can't be easy for her either. Damien looked at Violet with something approaching awe. "Even now, after everything she's done, you're worried about her feelings. She's your mother, Damien. She loves you, even if she shows it in a complicated way." When they reached the executive floor, chaos greeted them. Phones were ringing constantly, employees were gathered around computers watching news coverage, and the conference room was filled with serious-looking men in expensive suits. The board members arrived an hour ago, Damien's secretary informed them. "They're waiting in conference room A." Damien straightened his tie and turned to Violet. "Whatever happens in there, know that I don't regret anything." "I know," she replied. Though her heart was racing, "Go handle your empire, Mr. Cross." The smile he gave her could have powered the building for a week. Violet tried to focus on work while Damien met with the board. But concentration was impossible. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see animated discussions, serious faces, and occasional glances in her direction. After 2 hours, the boardroom door finally opened. The board members filed out, their expressions unreadable. Some nodded politely to Violet as they passed, while others avoided eye contact entirely. Damien emerged last, looking tired but determined. "How bad?" Violet asked when he reached her desk. "Mixed reactions," he replied. "Half of them think I've lost my mind. The other half think it's the best publicity the company has ever received. The bottom line, they're giving me 30 days to prove that this relationship enhances rather than damages the company. If stock prices drop or we lose major clients, they want me to step down as CEO." Violet felt the blood drain from her face. "Damien, no. You can't risk everything for me." "I'm not risking everything for you," he said quietly.
"Actually,
"I'm risking everything. For us, there's a difference." Before Violet could respond, Helena Cross emerged from the elevator, flanked by Victoria Sterling and 2 men Violet didn't recognize. The older woman moved through the office like a queen surveying her domain, her cold gaze taking in every detail. "Damien," Helena said without preamble. "We need to have a family meeting now. Mother, I'm busy. This can't wait." Helena's voice carried steel beneath the silk. "Victoria has something important to tell you. Something that changes everything." Reluctantly, Damien led the group into his office, leaving Violet alone at her desk. Through the glass walls, she watched Victoria take center stage, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light as she gestured dramatically. Whatever Victoria was saying made Damien's expression grow darker by the minute. He stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists, and began pacing behind his desk. Helena appeared to be trying to calm him down, while the two unknown men remained silent observers. The meeting lasted an hour, and when it ended, Victoria emerged with a triumphant smile while Helena looked satisfied. Damien remained in his office, staring out the window at the city below. "Trouble in paradise?" Victoria asked sweetly as she passed Violet's desk. "I wouldn't know," Violet replied evenly. "But you will. Very soon." Victoria's smile turned predatory. "You see, I've just shared some very interesting information about your past with Damien. Information that his mother's private investigators uncovered." Violet's heart stopped. "What are you talking about? Your college boyfriend, James Mitchell. The one you were engaged to before you moved to New York. The one whose trust fund you supposedly stole from." "That's not true," Violet said, her voice barely above a whisper. "James was troubled. He had a gambling addiction and drug problems. When his family found out, they blamed me because it was easier than admitting their golden boy was self-destructing." "Your story?" Victoria shrugged. "But documents can be very convincing, especially when they're presented by the right lawyers." As Victoria and Helena left, Violet sat frozen at her desk. James Mitchell had been her biggest mistake and deepest regret. She had genuinely loved him during college, but his addictions had destroyed their relationship and nearly destroyed her reputation. His wealthy family had accused her of enabling his behavior and stealing money from his accounts to fund her own ambitions. The charges had been dropped when the truth came out, but the scandal had followed her for years. She had never told Damien about James, because it was painful and irrelevant to their relationship. Now that omission was about to cost them everything. When Damien finally emerged from his office, his face was a mask of controlled fury. But the fury wasn't directed at her. "We need to talk," he said quietly, "but not here." They took the elevator to the roof, where the city sprawled beneath them in the golden light of late afternoon. For several minutes they stood in silence, the wind whipping around them. "They told you about James," Violet said finally. "They told me their version of James," Damien replied. "Now I want yours." So Violet told him everything, about falling in love with a charming college boy who hid his demons behind expensive clothes and family connections, about watching him spiral into addiction while his family enabled his behavior, about being blamed when she finally tried to intervene, about the false accusations and the legal battle that had nearly destroyed her financially and emotionally. "I should have told you before," she finished, "but it was the worst period of my life, and I've spent years trying to move past it." Damien was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had said. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "Do you know what I told my mother when she finished her presentation about your criminal past?" Violet shook her head. "I told her that if she had spent half as much energy investigating your character instead of your background, she would have discovered what I already know. You're the most honest, compassionate, and ethical person I've ever met." Relief flooded through Violet's body, making her knees weak. "But this isn't over," Damien continued, his jaw tightening. "My mother and Victoria have orchestrated something bigger. Tomorrow, they're planning to hold a press conference announcing my engagement to Victoria. They've already drafted the press release and scheduled interviews." "What?" Violet gasped. "They think that by forcing my hand publicly, they can corner me into choosing business over love. They don't understand that they've just made the biggest mistake of their lives." Damien pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. "What are you doing?" Violet asked. "Something that's going to shock the business world, the social media universe, and probably break several internet servers in the process." He showed her the screen. He was creating a live video event on every social media platform simultaneously, scheduled for the next morning at the exact time his mother had planned her press conference. "Damien, what are you planning?" "The most public proposal in corporate history," he said with a grin that was equal parts nervous and determined. "I'm going to ask the woman I love to marry me in front of the entire world, and I'm going to do it before my mother can announce my engagement to someone else." Are you completely insane? Violet asked, though she was starting to smile despite herself. Probably. But I'm also completely in love with you, and I refuse to let anyone else write our story. That evening, Damien's team worked around the clock to coordinate the most ambitious social media event in corporate history. They secured partnerships with every major platform, arranged for professional streaming equipment, and created a hashtag that was already trending before the event even began. Hashtag Damien proposes live. Meanwhile, Helena and Victoria remained oblivious to the plan, confident that their morning press conference would settle the matter once and for all. Violet spent the night in her apartment, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she was dreaming. In less than 12 hours, the man she loved was going to propose to her in front of millions of people. The fairy tale aspect of it all seemed too good to be true. The next morning, CrossTech's main conference room had been transformed into a broadcast studio. Professional cameras were positioned at multiple angles, lighting had been perfected, and a live audience of employees, clients, and journalists had gathered. At exactly 10 a.m., just as Helena Cross was stepping up to a podium 3 blocks away to announce her son's engagement to Victoria Sterling, Damien Cross went live to the world. "Good morning," he said, looking directly into the camera. "My name is Damien Cross, and I have something important to say." Within minutes, the viewership had climbed to over 50 million people worldwide. The stream was being broadcast on every major news network, shared across social media platforms, watched in offices, homes, and public spaces around the globe. "3 days ago, I posted about the woman I love," Damien continued. "Today, I want to take that conversation to its logical conclusion." He gestured to someone off camera, and Violet appeared, looking beautiful but nervous in a simple blue dress. That brought out her eyes. "Violet Chen," Damien said, taking her hands as she joined him in front of the cameras. "You came into my life as my assistant, but you became my anchor. You've shown me what it means to build something meaningful, to prioritize people over profits, and to choose authenticity over appearances." The live chat was exploding with comments. Hearts and fire emojis filled the screen faster than the eye could follow. Hashtag Damien proposes live was trending in 47 countries. "In a world that often values status over substance, you've reminded me what really matters," Damien continued. "You've made me a better leader, a better man, and a better human being." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box that sparkled under the studio lights. Violet gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears began streaming down her face. "Violet Chen, will you marry me? Not because it makes business sense, not because it looks good in the newspapers, but because I can't imagine building a life with anyone else." Silence in the room was deafening as millions of people around the world held their breath. "Yes," Violet whispered, then louder, "Yes, Damien, yes." The eruption of cheers from the live audience was nothing compared to the explosion across social media. Within seconds, hashtag SHES said yes was trending alongside hashtag Damien proposes live. News outlets were scrambling to cover the story, celebrities were sharing congratulatory messages, and ordinary people around the world were crying happy tears at their screens. As Damien slipped the ring onto Violet's finger and kissed her in front of 50 million viewers, 2 very different reactions were taking place across the city. At the Ritz-Carlton, Helena Cross stood at a podium facing a room full of confused journalists. A prepared announcement about Damien's engagement to Victoria suddenly obsolete. Victoria Sterling had fled the hotel in tears after seeing the proposal on her phone. But at CrossTech Industries, employees were cheering, investors were calling with congratulations, and the stock price was climbing to record heights. Love, it seemed, was excellent for business after all. As the live stream ended and Damien and Violet were swept up in a whirlwind of congratulations, interviews, and celebration plans, they managed to steal a quiet moment alone in Damien's office. "So," Violet said, admiring the ring on her finger. "What now?" "Now," Damien replied, pulling her close, "we build an empire together. Not just in business, but in life. We show the world that the best partnerships are built on love, respect, and shared dreams. And your mother will come around eventually. She's stubborn, but she's not stupid. She'll realize that you're exactly what this family needs." 6 months later, Damien and Violet were married in a ceremony that was live-streamed to over 200 million viewers worldwide. Helena Cross, who had indeed come around after seeing how happy her son was and how good Violet was for both him and the company, walked Violet down the aisle in place of her father, who had passed away the year before. Victoria Sterling sent a wedding gift and a gracious note of congratulation from her new home in London, where she had started her own successful interior design firm. The Damien and Violet Cross Foundation became one of the largest charitable organizations in the world, focusing on education opportunities for children from small towns and supporting young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. And every year on the anniversary of that first social media post, Damien would recreate the photo that started it all. Though now, instead of a secret dinner, it captured a couple who had proved that sometimes the greatest business strategy is simply following your heart. Their love story had become more than just a fairy tale. It had become proof that in a world obsessed with status and appearances, authenticity and genuine connection would always find a way to triumph. The billionaire had chosen love over status, and in doing so, had gained something more valuable than all his wealth combined: a true partner for life.